Document content. Application
Part
menu
3
bar
of
banner.
3.
Menu
Submarine
bar.
base turned foe. Vatican down, USA woes.
In mind's backdrop and somehow filtering on through toward the lucid forefront of consciousness existed the feeling that being trapped inside of one of these fires was scarcely a greater colossal grim fate for persons still scampering to free themselves, and disheartening it was when many a person at wit's end collapsed to a siege hold inside. Emotionally spent and non-violently collapsing in abandon while letting themselves drift into something other than mayhem. One man sinking to the ground by against a utility pole, slithering to fall to his backside while sobbing sore. Less than 1 hour later it sounded still and distant as men judge distance when was reflected an ominous grumbling airborne disturbance that seemed to be tethered to a collapsible apprehension that just wouldn't unfold. As though surveilling the scene before divesting and from out of the sky crashing down. And because of the menace descending on Vatican Square, 100 or so fleeing persons aborted plans while thinking downfield in favor of slipping into an off-street refuge place nearby. That hovering menace above wouldn't forever idle in that peculiar repose, and the air, sulfuric and contaminated by the repugnant drip condemning the region and olfactory senses with each passing second, portended a terminal dread that was already touching down and creating an invisible shroud of nest around the escaping persons, in full anticipation of eluding the worst of who for sure knew what it was. Same fleeing persons covering their eyes and noses on a concerted decision turned into a dubious sanctum in an emergency shelter thus far gone unnoticed. As though in full anticipation of the monstrous ball of orange fire that seemed to in its fiery glow descend in sickening slow motion only while beginning to chase away shadows from the scampering throng's facial clefts and bone as many a suppressed breath, impaled by hyperventilation episodes, were final ones with the atomic blast itself comprised of thousands and thousands of breaths and an unceasing succession of waves of tornadic icy fury unconstrained by no one certain thing. And with the fire and liquid pandemonium in other regions of the world resulting in legacy-ending stubble in places neighboring Damascus and Tehran that were, as had they for so long been known as, facilitating places of harbor for terrorist cells and still officially a threat. It was hard to understand how persons on defensive posture there could have made way to places like Italy to brandish a sword of a kind in this offensive move. Persons everywhere in such parts of the world running to the hills and finally appreciating a lull and suspecting in the least bit that they might have to any time soon any organized lethal posture duck. The earth untroubled for a stint in days recent, leaving many persons to believe that finally an attempt on his life had met with success, yet in a sense here he was in menace shape with all of tendril, scale and claw lowering from the sky. The Iranian captain Khalil Ahmed Zayyadi, born in Iran but bred in America and promoted to ranks of U.S. Navy lieutenant, with hands folded smiled as though at his lifelong accomplishment that's return had exceeded because of some fortuitous to him element unto his expectation of a gainly dividend. With some 30 carcasses down and strewn about the submarine floor grown colder, he traipsed over top of them, as though on a riverside gallivant, while staring down at them with a malevolent form of pleasure and unnatural inside habitation place dimly elicited in each darkly vacant eye orb, most of whom were poisoned and several who, amid violent resistance upon finally receiving the transmission from somewhere at Alexander Alastair Gale Wentworth's capital, were summarily executed by the snake planted years prior to commissioning when he covertly acted out his mission as an Iranian spy thought to have verily been en route to take part both against and for his own nation implacably shorn by civil unrest and government upheaval. On the wings of radar-repellent signal haphazard back inland with guns of prognosticated catastrophe aiming at the DC capital. The one flying missile some years ago missing its mark on the days of terroristic infamy when towers did collapse, replaced by what was designed for not commercial flight but impact that was infinitely more lethal. It was only a half-dozen years prior when the same admiral, as seen via telecast, received congratulation and merit medals for his heroic antics, having led the team of service personnel in the daunting rescue attempt of ironically the same men ordering his task today in hopes of further wreaking what should feel like terminal havoc on the rest of the civilized world. Who could suspect that such a hero would take part against his own country behind his celebrated tenure thus far? The thought was to not only USA service personnel same 1/2-dozen-year future, but also did persons indigenous to his actual homeland think, including citizens of Iran. Nasser Abu Mata Hussein crept in to draw the lines between dictator and citizen impossibly thick. How gracious the eastern portion of the world map appeared then, with the resulting move to the lifting of sanctions, as the sub is, or this sub was, scarcely fraught with mechanical defections. Swore man an American alongside much of the civilized world. The devil is in the details. I repeat, the devil's in the details. Concluded those continuing in doubt, who were by others seen as rabble-rousing conspiracy theorists, and at the most god-awful time not to seek amends and trust for the sake of a unified strength. Quote, I predict the healing and rebuilding in America. Quote, had said the Israeli Prime Minister post-attack in straits agony and distress already over the homeland attacks there and in the entire Middle Eastern world in volatility's irrecoverable flux. He was, as were many, or few, depending, world leaders addressing the matter of boiling civil unrest and defections and appeaseless strife, when violence only metastasized into woeful violence, as said one news reporter on another weekly show, resembling more so their weekend airings whenever signals were letting. Quote, we are in a mini-apocalypse inside of a worldwide apocalypse, promising no end in sight, and the planet does under compounded distress detrimentally wobble on her axis. The unfinished business. I say.
Hey, good luck with that.
Left by Osama in her chief city, quote, in Arabic began the man at the submarines, quote, ellipsis, is finally accomplished in what we have stored inside of the chamber. May Allah once again be on our side, as he ever is. Some shall survive, and the same as prisoners at first, quote, began his appointed lieutenant. Their children shall soon be speaking Arabic as mother tongue, and let us now give her the mother load for the carnage spread abroad, encouraged by the former administration's embargoes and sanctions order. They've made Western rebels of our students and youth back in Tehran. Rebels lost in Western culture, lost in their cell phones, and they're socialized, is how he said it. Ellipsis Media. Taking over the streets back home. Quote, yes, quote, began a third man in, adjusting some console controls before weaving fingers and exhaling, leaning back into his chair as though enjoying opportunity to relax for an overdue second.
Devok 55.
Quote, let us be vindicated and assail the big Satan who some dare to nickname the bastion of freedom for the so-called civilized world.
Lawsuits are imminent.
We do not live to praise their God who, even he, I think, smiles on her carnage. He paused and loosely fixed a pair of diabolical eyes, his own on two men whose limbs crossways intersect on the floor, tapping his hand lightly off his knee while smiling a smile of a brewing pleasure that's lather find his widening eyes before readjusting his glance, turning to again casually address the standing men moving in beside him to take a seat. Something like what the diabolical fool charlatans Moses and Elijah said. The God one in the whole universe. He does not intervene for her sake, to which said the admiral, his perpetual brow furrowed and further etched into rows of taut skin to take task to reveal a semblance of emotion for this otherwise non-expressive stoical type. Quote, on same hand same we shall be off to our destination with them off to theirs. As Nasser has said, only we expedite the process. Maybe. Yes. As Ambassador Hussein has said, yesterday we collapse your towers, but today we lampoon your entire metropolis areas. Your cities. They've seen the fate of their beloved capital by the street antics your own. And, Nasser continued, since you do not put a stop to the unrest blamed on us, we shall then move in to assist. As I warned, quote, ellipsis and counting, quote, from 3 minutes down to the anticipated second of discharge, second and unloading of the warhead. The order given to unload at the given time, even if the call should not go through, as though Nasser expected that it wouldn't. And still much to these submariners' bewilderment, this was the instance here. Less than 2 minutes, the lieutenant said, sitting next to the decorated admiral at the proverbial helm, said to the man in the seat of doom. So-called. In jest only recently referred as. Then 2 minutes. Quote, Lieutenant. Do you think they finally did get him? Quote, the man to initiate the point of no return said, resolutely adjusting his position while making a visual assessment on a monitor. Do you think they finally got him? Quote. Who? Ambassador Hussein? Strange time to ask, but I think maybe yes. You read my mind. He only had so many body doubles, and I believe that he was running out of the clefts of earth to hide himself in. There are other reasons that he wouldn't make the call. However, Windows submarine beast turned foe. 70. Until pulseless. Vatican down. USA woes. 70.
There's 4 parts. I don't know what
Ely
happened there.
James.
There's 4 parts of
All rights reserved.
4 instead of 3 of 3.
2023.
I ain't sure why he
Updated February.
went to that.
29. 2024. Google Docs tab. Document. You haven't heard. See how clandestine we can be. Setting off the fires without igniting the match. She fares worse than Washington. Fared as. Then 2 minutes. Quote, Lieutenant.
I'm gonna start here instead.
Do you
so
think they finally
skip that
did get
last
him?
minute.
Quote, the man to initiate the point of no.
Here.
Less than 2 minutes. The lieutenant said, sitting next to the decorated admiral at the proverbial helm, said to the man in the seat of doom. So-called.
It's a shame I have to
In jest
butt
only
in. I'm
recently
sorry about
referred
that,
as.
but
Then 2 minutes. Quote, Lieutenant. Do you think they finally did get him? Quote, the man to initiate the point of no return said, resolutely adjusting his position while making a visual assessment on a monitor. Do you think they finally got him? Quote. Who? Ambassador Hussein? Strange time to ask, but I think maybe yes. You read my mind. He only had so many body doubles, and I believe that he was running out of the clefts of earth to hide himself in. There are other reasons that he wouldn't make the call. However, the 2 men responded in a kind of eye-averting gaze of informed and in private significance, and having more than a surface-level inkling beyond trace of an idea as to what was passing through the admiral's mind. If he wanted to, I think he could walk into the very mushroom cloud after landing and breeze on through. Imagine lathering up his hands and coolly whistling a tune as he ever does. The men were thinking something else. Mushroom cloud? Back at home? Have they attacked back at home? You haven't heard. See how clandestine we can be. Setting off the fires without igniting the match. She fares worse than Washington. The Vatican has been attacked. Nasser greatly turned on by persons disassociated with Pierre de Rome and the persons there. The 2 men with mouths agape settled upon stunned disbelief when their large eyes behind the lieutenants enlarged the more. Quote, Rome. Italy. Quote, said the man who'd worn the digital countdown lights as reflecting in his circular framed wire rim, other with his face near pressed against the radar screen and muscles tightening like his shoulder muscles. Pietro's Palace? Haha. I understand why.
Piotr's.
On last word, switching to steal a glance over his shoulder. Only with effort switching. Self-amused.
None of these characters are based on anybody
Quote, I don't doubt
that
anything
I know of,
brave anymore. Especially for
or
turncoats squawking out
resemblance to their
Nasser's
first
actual
names,
hiding
for
places.
instance.
As
None of
for
them.
us
They're
1 minute
fictitious.
and ticking down, he was interrupted as the admiral unnecessarily pointed, nodding his head while indicating the console beneath the countdown clock, and as unnecessarily
mentioned somebody of
soliciting the 10 to
notoriety
4
from
from
the
his
past.
appointed destiny destroyers. Yes, sir. It's time, then. Less officially, while assessing the invisible path separating his hand. Somewhat trembling. And the key lodged behind the glass plunged into the console. My brothers, we know that mistakes have happened. Whatever happens here alongside the martyrs, maybe we shall see each other and them soon. Quote, and leaning into his shoulders, wincing and growing terribly resigned to task suddenly, as though he were in the submarine alone. Mustered he a strangulated cry when cried he,